why did the victims of October 7th, who quite rightly deserve sympathy, get Emily Maitlis' sympathy, but not thousands of girls who have been raped, tortured, in some cases murdered, just like the girls in Reem at the Nova Festival? Why do they not get the same amount of sympathy?
95% of these people are Pakistanis, and very often from a particular part of Pakistan.
That's absolutely not
true.
So
it is true. It is true, Emily. But anyway,
no.
let's
from 2023. I'm going to tell you this.
Park that.
224 white grooming gang suspects were found compared to 22 Pakistani suspects. Why do you only talk about the Pakistani grooming gangs? That's police statistics from the Times.
I've now got on my
police statistics from the Times. I'm telling you that you are focusing on Pakistani grooming gangs because probably you're racist and you don't believe that there are white perpetrators of the same crime. Can you deny that?
As far as the stats that Emily Maitlis was citing to call Rupert Lowe a racist, I have a piece out tomorrow in The Critic going over a lot of this, but she referenced a report in the Times from Operation Hydrant, which collated the data on child sexual abuse and exploitation offences by ethnicity from all 43 police forces in England and Wales. And it shows that 23% of group-based exploitation cases were committed by Asian male offenders. 7% of those were Pakistani, even though Pakistani males are only 2.7% of the population according to the 2021 census. So that means that by her own statistics, Pakistani men are overrepresented by a factor of 2. But if she doesn't like those statistics that, she herself cited to call Rupert Lowe a racist, we can go to some ones where, rather than nationally, we look regionally, where there is a large concentration of Pakistani males. And we can look at West Yorkshire. Now, this is data that I got given by a Freedom of Information request for 2009 to 2024, when the new sexual exploitation guidelines were released. And they gave it by the victim and the perpetrator's ethnicity. And Asian suspects, and what they mean by this is, of course, Pakistani, Bangladeshi, because it's not like Japanese businessmen or Sikhs doing this, right? Asian suspects were between 23 and 43% of child sexual abuse offence suspects. That's a rate 2 to 4 times their share of the population, both locally, of course, and nationally. And white victims were the largest group. Pakistani victims, Asian Pakistani victims, are only 2%. So this shows that despite being the largest group per capita of perpetrators, they were the smallest group of victims, which means that these crimes are happening between ethnic groups rather than within households, as Emily Maitlis was insinuating to call Rupert Lowe racist. These stats have been out there recently. Stats from 2013 show that Asian males were the largest group of offenders for type 1 group-based child sexual exploitation. And then, of course, there was the Quilliam report in 2017 that found that 84% of these offenders were Asian. And even Dr. Ella Cockbain, right, who is the go-to academic by The Guardian to refute the grooming gangs narrative, found in her own work, in her own sample, that 80% of the offenders of child sexual abuse were ethnically Pakistani. And she said herself, well, I don't want to provide a conclusion on this, and I'm shocked by the data. Turns out that actually the perpetrators themselves are very vocal about the racial, religious, and ethnic motivations for their crimes. And Emily Maitlis, to deny this, to obfuscate this, to say, well, all grooming's bad, just like Jeremy Corbyn says when he's asked, why do you support Hezbollah? Well, all terrorism bad. It is inexcusable in the face of abundant evidence. And I might touch a bit of a third rail here, but I don't think it's just that Emily Maitlis is delusionally liberal and has an abundance of compassion. I think her compassion is very, very selective. And I've written about this in my piece on this essay. Both her and her co-host, Jon Sopel, are British Jews. And so after October the 7th, they were quite rightly appalled not just by the acts of barbarity that were committed by Hamas on that day, but by the denial in the streets by pro-Hamas marchers who registered with the Met Police to conduct their hate march before the bodies had even gone cold, before the massacre had even stopped, right? And they said that these scenes were appalling and they were afraid as British Jews for their future in the country if so many people were denying these atrocities to their face. If someone had sat down opposite Emily Maitlis and said, well, There were only 6 million Jews that died in the Holocaust, but there were 20 million people that died on the Western Front. So why are you only talking about Jews? Don't you think all death is bad? Why are you focusing on it so much? She would quite rightly call that person an anti-Semite. She would quite rightly say, I think that you do not have my best interests at heart. I think you don't like me, and I don't think you like me as a group because I'm Jewish. I think you're dismissing atrocities that have been committed against me, for my race, and for my perceived religion. I don't know if she's practicing. And if I presume she has, like many journalists, been privy to the horrific footage that Hamas themselves recorded from that day. We're broadcasting it, we're filming it, we're phoning family members and boasting about it. Okay, if that's the standard, right? The perpetrators were unapologetic. There is abundant documentation of these crimes, and that if you deny it, you should not be provided a platform by something as wealthy as the news agents, Global, and presumably LBC and the BBC, where all the hosts formerly had their careers, then why did the victims of October 7th, who quite rightly deserve sympathy, get Emily Maitlis' sympathy, but not thousands of girls who have been raped, tortured, in some cases murdered, just like the girls in Reim at the Nova Festival? Why do they not get the same amount of sympathy? Why does Emily Maitlis just obfuscate in the great cloud of child sexual offences this specific crime where, just like Hamas, the Pakistani rapists are unapologetic about abusing these girls because they are kafir and because they are white and because they think the Pakistanis are the supreme race, and as one transcript that was read out by Katie Lamb recently have said, we're here to F white girls and F the government. There is a specifically racial, religious, and political motivation to these crimes, just as there was in October the 7th committed by Hamas. So why does Emily Maitlis care about those girls in Israel, but not these girls in England? I think it's a disgusting double standard, and I think it should be called out.